Wyoming Territory, 1877. The wind tore across the dry flats east of Laramie, dragging a haze of dust over the trail where Rosalind Garrison stumbled with one boot half split and the other missing a sole. She had not cried when they threw her out. Not when the homestead owner's wife clucked her tongue and said, "You look like you might snap in half. You scare the children." Not when the others in town turned their eyes away like thinness was a disease you could catch. But now, 2 days without food and her shoulders burning from the weight of her carpetbag, she felt her knees shake. She was not always like this. Before the fever last winter, she'd been strong enough to lift a feed sack, plant 2 rows of corn on one knee. But the sickness had taken the curve from her frame and left sharp bones beneath pale skin. Folks did not want a woman who looked like she might vanish on the wind. So she kept walking west toward nothing in particular. She had nowhere left to go. A low rumble stopped her in her tracks. Hooves. A rider. She gripped her bag handle with both hands and stepped off the trail, heart pounding. If he wanted trouble, she did not have the strength to fight it. The rider slowed, then stopped entirely. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a thick brown coat and a wide hat shadowing his face. His Mustang snorted, sensing her fear. "You lost." His voice was deep, low like distant thunder. She kept her chin up. No, his eyes scanned her, pausing on her hands, her face, the way her dress hung too loose around her frame. "You look like you ain't eaten since Tuesday." "I am fine," she lied. He dismounted, slow and careful as if not to startle her. He pulled a piece of jerky from his saddlebag and held it out. "I am not a thief," she said. "Good," he said, "because I am not either. Just a man who does not like seeing someone fall over in the dirt." She took it, too hungry to resist. Her fingers brushed his, and they were warm, steady. He watched her eat, then said, "Name's Fletcher McAllister. I run cattle up north about 10 miles. You headed anywhere?" Rosalind hesitated. "No. You got people?" She shook her head. "I had a job. They let me go." He did not press, just nodded once and looked out toward the horizon. Then he looked back. "You can ride with me. I will give you a bed and a meal. No tricks, no strings." She stared at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "You look like you need someone to stop pretending not to see you." Her throat tightened. She looked down at her boots to keep from crying. Fletcher turned to his horse. "Come on. We will go slow." She climbed up behind him, awkward from exhaustion, but he steadied her with one large hand at her back. The warmth of his coat against her arms made her chest ache. They rode in silence. She let her head rest against his shoulder halfway through. He did not say a word. By the time they reached the ranch, dusk had fallen. A low fence circled the place, a modest house with smoke curling from the chimney, a barn to the side. Fletcher helped her down and opened the front door. The scent of stew drifted out, and something inside her cracked. "You live here alone?" she asked. He nodded. "My folks passed. I have hands who come and go, but I keep the place myself." She followed him in, legs shaking. He pulled out a chair for her. She sat down hard. He ladled stew into a bowl and placed it in front of her. She gripped the spoon like it might vanish. Halfway through her meal, she looked up and whispered, "Thank you." His eyes met hers. "You are welcome." He brought out a blanket and a small pillow. "You can take the bed. I will sleep out here." "I cannot take your bed," she said. He crossed his arms. "You can. You will. I am stubborn, Miss Garrison." She blinked. "You remembered my name." He smiled, just barely. Hard to forget something soft. That night, she lay in a real bed for the first time in weeks. The warmth of the quilt, the smell of clean wood, the sound of wind shifting outside, it all felt like a dream. She stared at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time someone had been kind to her without asking for something in return. In the morning, she stepped into the kitchen to find Fletcher frying eggs. He looked up when he saw her. "Sleep all right?" "Yes. Better than I have in months." He passed her a plate. "Eat. Then you can rest more or help me with the calves." "Up to you." She studied him. You are not worried I will run off with your silver? I do not own any, he said. And if you run, I reckon you will not get far on those legs. She laughed. A short, surprised sound. Felt strange good. Over the next few days, she helped where she could. Folding linens, sweeping the porch, once even feeding calves from a bottle. She was still weak, but Fletcher never rushed her. You do what you can, he said. That is enough. One afternoon, she found him fixing a broken fence rail. She paused, watching the muscles in his arms shift as he worked. Why did you stop? She asked. He looked over, back on the trail. Why did you stop for me? He leaned on the post, wiping his brow. Because I know what it feels like to be left behind. She stepped closer. You do not look like someone folks cast out. He met her eyes. You cannot always see it from the outside. She nodded. I wish more people thought like you. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, You are not too thin. You are just worn down. Her breath caught. You will get strong again, he said. You are already halfway there. She stepped forward, heart pounding. You really believe that? He nodded. I do. She reached out and touched his arm. He did not move away. I do not know what I would have done if you had not found me, she whispered. I do, he said. You would have kept walking. Because that is what strong people do. She stared at him, her hand still on his arm. And for the first time in too long, she believed him. The first snow came late that year. Fletcher stood at the edge of the corral, one gloved hand resting on the gatepost, watching the sky let down its flurry in slow, deliberate flakes. Rosalind had taken to wearing one of his old wool shirts beneath her dress, sleeves rolled to her elbows where she was splitting kindling near the porch. She worked slower than most, but steady. He respected that. She never asked for rest, but he noticed when her hands trembled after too long. When that happened, he brought her a tin mug of broth or set her on the porch bench with a blanket and said nothing. She never argued. Rosalind straightened, brushing with dust from her skirt. Do you always winter alone? He stepped away from the fence. Last couple years, yes? Hands head south once the cattle resettled. I manage. You ever think of selling? No use thinking on things I ain't willing to do. She nodded. I suppose not. He glanced at her hands, red at the knuckles, dry from wind. They didn't match the softness of her voice, or the way she moved careful around animals. Like she knew what they didn't say out loud. I've been meaning to ask, he said. How'd you learn to mend a bridle like that? Saw what you did with the frayed strap yesterday. She pressed her lips together, surprised. My father raised mules to pull carts. Farm goods mostly. We couldn't afford new tack, so he taught me to repair what we had. He teach you other things? Enough to keep a place from falling in on itself. She paused. He died 3 winters ago. Ate moldy grain, didn't know it. Wasn't much left after that. Fletcher adjusted his collar. I'm sorry. I got by, she said. One job to the next. I never stayed long. Never felt welcome. You feel it now? Her eyes lifted to his, steady as a mare's under a calm hand. I think I might. Later that afternoon, she lingered in the barn while he checked the feed bins. The lantern swung low from its hook, throwing gold onto the hay-strewn floor. She traced a finger along the edge of a wooden beam, worn smooth by years of use. You always keep things this neat? She asked. He looked up from the grain scoop. My mother didn't take kindly to disorder. Raised me to keep things squared away even if no one else sees it. She sounds like she had a spine. She did. He set the scoop down. Taught me to cook too. Said a man ought to know how to fill his own plate. Rosalind smiled, faint but real. No wonder your stew's as good as it is. He stepped closer, brushing hay from his sleeve. You think about staying? She looked down at her boots. I think about what it would feel like to stop running. He waited. I like it here, she said finally. I like the quiet, the way the wind sounds through the eaves. I like that you don't ask me to be more than I am. I never will, he said. But I will ask you to be honest. She looked at him then, full and open. I want to stay. He reached out, slow as always, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Then stay. She closed her eyes for a moment, leaning into the warmth of his hand. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A man who'd want something for his kindness. I want company that doesn't feel like noise, he said, and someone who sees the work and still chooses it. She stepped forward, arms crossed against the chill. I see it. He nodded, voice low. Then we'll build from there. That night they sat by the stove. No words, only the soft crackle of burning logs and the creak of the rocking chair she'd claimed as her own. He handed her a folded scarf of thick wool, one he found tucked in a drawer, never worn. She unfolded it carefully. Yours. Was meant for someone. Never gave it. She wrapped it around her throat slowly, fingers brushing the knit. You giving it now? I am. Rosalind looked at him for a long time and then leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The wind pressed against the window panes, but inside was warm, still, and full of the kind of quiet that only came when two people found the place they were meant to be. The first thaw came with the sound of ice breaking off the roof at dawn. Fletcher had risen early to check the creek south of the barn, where the runoff sometimes swelled and flooded the fence line. Rosalind found him ankle-deep in meltwater, sleeves pushed to his elbows, hammering a new brace into the gatepost before the frost let it heave again. You didn't wait for breakfast, she said from the bank, boots crunching over brittle grass. I figured I'd earn it first. She crouched beside a patch of snowdrops pushing through the soil. Something's blooming already. Creek always warms up faster than the rest, he said. Ground remembers where the sun hits first. She reached out and touched a petal. I never noticed things like that before. You notice plenty. I used to miss it. Moving too much. Never saw a place long enough to learn how it breathes. He set the hammer down and looked at her. You learning this one? She nodded. I think so. That afternoon, she brought out a wooden box she'd kept at the back of his pantry wrapped in muslin. Inside were scraps of muslin and cotton, some torn from an old petticoat, others from a cast-off shirt he hadn't worn since the collar tour. She spread them on the table while he rinsed his hands at the basin. You making something? He asked. I thought I might start a quilt. He leaned against the counter. You sew much. Not for pleasure. But it keeps the hands busy, and I thought, she glanced at him, maybe we could use something for the bed once it warms. Fletcher stepped closer, eyeing the mix of faded patterns. You putting it on your bed or mine? She didn't look away. I thought that might depend on whether we still keep to separate rooms come spring. He didn't answer right away. Then I don't intend to make you sleep alone if you don't want to. I don't. He moved to the table, picked up a square of blue calico with frayed edges. You planning a pattern? I was thinking log cabin. He traced the edge of the fabric. That fits. Rosalind threaded a needle with quiet precision. Did anyone ever ask you what you wanted out of life? Not often. Folks figured I'd stay where I was planted. And is that what you wanted? I wanted quiet. Land I could work. Someone who didn't walk off the second things got hard. She folded a new square and looked up. You've got the first two. I know. He met her gaze. You think you might be the third? I think I already am. Fletcher pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Guess we should make it official. Is that you proposing? I could get down on one knee, but I'd rather not do it with mud on my boots and half the fence still broken. She smiled, but kept sewing. Then say it plain. I want to marry you, Rosalind. She tied off the thread and set the needle aside. Then I reckon I'll say yes. Outside, the wind had eased. The snow was pulling back from the fence posts, revealing patches of earth where the roots waited. That evening, they cleared the table together. He dried the plates while she stacked them. When the last was set away, he reached for her hand. You sure? I've never been more. He led her to the bedroom without ceremony. No rush in his steps. And when she lay beside him beneath the old quilt, she wrapped her arm across his chest like she meant to stay there forever. And she did. The wedding was quiet, held beneath the cottonwoods near the back pasture, just as the first green began to push from the branches. Fletcher shaved, wore a clean shirt, and brushed his hair back with water from the pump. Rosalind tied her hair with a soft blue ribbon she'd found at the bottom of her sewing tin. It had belonged to her mother once, she said, though she didn't offer more than that, and Fletcher didn't ask. The circuit preacher from Elk Hollow came out in a wagon drawn by 2 old mules, his wife beside him with a pie wrapped in cheesecloth. They stood under the morning sun as the preacher read from a leather-bound Bible, rough from years of use. Fletcher held Rosalind's hands like they were the reins to something too precious to let slip, and when the words were spoken and the silence settled, he leaned forward and kissed her without hesitation. Afterward, they shared biscuits and blackberry preserves on the porch steps. The preacher and his wife left before noon, and the wind picked up again, scattering petals from the plum tree over the yard. That night, Rosalind folded her dress and placed it carefully in the cedar chest by their bed. Fletcher sat nearby, unlacing his boots. "I've been thinking," she said, pulling the blanket back, "about building a root cellar." He looked over. "You planning to grow a dozen acres of turnips?" "I'm planning not to lean on canned meat next winter." He nodded. "We'll dig it before the ground gets hard again. I'll need to order more nails for framing." Rosalind climbed into bed, tucking her feet beneath the quilt. "I know how to stack stone. The foundation won't shift if we do it right." Fletcher slid in beside her, arm resting behind her shoulders. "You want to draw up a plan tomorrow?" "I already did. It's under the flour tin." He laughed a low, genuine sound she hadn't heard from him before. "You don't waste time." There was never time to waste. They lay in the dark, the fire in the stove reduced to a soft glow. "You ever think about children?" Fletcher asked after a while. Rosalind shifted, her voice quiet. "Once. I used to wonder what kind of mother I'd be." "You think you'd want them now?" She hesitated. "Yes, but not because I'm supposed to. Because it would be ours." He turned his face toward hers. "Then if it happens, we raise them honest. Teach them the land, the animals, how to stand through a storm." She nodded. "And how to make stew that doesn't taste like shoe leather. That your way of saying mine's gone downhill?" "I'm saying they'll have 2 good pairs of hands to learn from." Spring deepened, and the days stretched longer. Fletcher built a new coop for the hens, and Rosalind planted sage near the kitchen window. She took to reading aloud in the evenings, her voice steady and low, while he carved cedar handles for the barn tools. One morning, she came in from the creek with her cheeks pink from the wind and her apron damp at the hem. She held out a folded sheet of parchment. "I sent away for these," she said. "They came through the Elk Hollow postmaster." Fletcher took the paper, unfolding it with care. His eyes scanned the sketches. "Tools for spinning? There's a man in Utah Territory who sells parts. I thought, if I could spin, we wouldn't need to buy cloth so often." He met her gaze. "You want to raise sheep?" "I want to make something that lasts." Fletcher folded the paper again, slow and deliberate. "Then we'll build you a loom first. You'll need it to weave." "I thought you might say that," she said, and kissed him once before turning back to the wash basin. By midsummer, the root cellar was dug, lined with stone and timbered at the top. Rosalind climbed down into it one afternoon and ran her hand along the cool wall. "It'll hold," she said, "even through snow." Fletcher stood above, holding a bucket of fresh dug earth. "Like you," he said. She looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "You hold," he said, "when everything else gives way." She didn't answer right off, just reached both arms toward him. He set the bucket down and pulled her up, steady and sure. That night, they sat on the porch in the hush before dusk. The sky was copper, the land stretching quiet and endless. Fletcher reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You still think about how folks saw you back then?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but it feels like remembering someone else's life." "You're not thin now," he said gently. "I know. But even if I was, I think you'd still want me." "I would," he said, "because I saw you before anything filled out. And I knew even then." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You never looked away. I never will." The wind shifted the tall grass in the distance like a sea. Inside, the oil lamp flickered in the window, casting soft light over what they'd built together. Rosalind closed her eyes and whispered, "This is enough." Fletcher kissed her temple, voice low. "It's only the start." The first lamb was born just past midnight under a moon half hidden by cloud. Rosalind had woken to the low bleat threading through the walls and Fletcher's absence beside her. She found him out in the barn, kneeling in the straw with his coat shrugged over the ew's back like a shield. "She's young," he said as she crouched beside him. "Didn't expect her to drop this soon." Rosalind eased her hand beneath the newborn, lifting it gently toward the mother's belly. "He's strong. Look at his legs." Fletcher nodded, rubbing the ew's flank. "You want to name him?" "We'll wait till morning," she said. "Let him earn it." They watched until the lamb found the teat and latched on, then sat back against the wall, shoulder to shoulder, boots buried in straw. He took her hand without looking. "You ever think you'd be here?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I think I always hoped for it." By the time the sun crested the hills, 3 more had come. Rosalind moved between the pens with quiet purpose, sleeves rolled and hair pinned back, her apron already streaked with milk and straw. Fletcher watched from the barn door, the light catching the side of her face as she knelt to check a tiny hoof. "You've got away with them," he said. "They trust me," she answered. "They know I won't force what's not ready." That afternoon, he brought her a strip of linen and a small copper pin wrapped in oiled cloth. "For your spinning," he said, "to mark the skeins." She unfolded it slowly, fingertips grazing the pin's smooth edges. "Did you make this?" "Carved it from scrap. Found the copper in the old tool shed. Figured you'd want something of your own." "I do," she said, "but I want it because it's from you." The lambs grew quickly and the days lengthened. They planted rows of carrots and onions near the creek bed, and Fletcher built a small bench beneath the cottonwood where she sometimes spun in the evenings, bare feet tucked beneath her skirt, the wheel humming like a lullaby. He'd sit nearby, sharpening blades or mending leather, content in the rhythm of her beside him. One morning in early June, Rosalind stood at the edge of the yard with her hand pressed low against her abdomen. She turned to find Fletcher fitting a new rail to the gate. "I think we'll need a cradle," she said. He straightened slowly. "You're sure?" She nodded, eyes bright and steady. "I've known a few weeks now. Wanted to be certain." He crossed the yard in 3 strides and cupped her face with both hands. "You tell me what you need and it's yours." She leaned into him, her voice low. "Just you. Steady and near." "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Through the summer, he worked long and quiet, building a rocking cradle from pine, sanding it smooth until the wood shone pale gold in the light. Rosalind spun strips of wool into soft threads, dyed with sage and walnut, and wove them into a blanket no larger than a saddlebag. "I want him warm," she said. "Or her," Fletcher added. They laughed, and the sound stayed in the rafters like something sacred. In the final weeks before the frost returned, Fletcher roofed the new shed and brought down the cradle from the loft. Rosalind lined it with the blanket and tucked in a carved wooden sheep he'd whittled beside the stove one night when she'd fallen asleep in the rocker. The baby came in the 2nd week of October with the wind howling over the ridge. Fletcher stayed at her side, hands steady through the long hours, wiping her brow and whispering only when she needed it. Just before dawn, the cries broke through the hush, fierce and strong. "A girl!" Rosalind said through tears, voice wrecked and full of joy. "She's perfect." Fletcher held the child in both hands, cradling her like something rare and breakable. "She's you," he said, small, but already holding on. They named her Clara, for no reason but that it felt right on the tongue. The first snowfall came gently. Rosalind sat near the hearth, Clara asleep against her chest. Fletcher poured tea, the scent of dried mint filling the room. Outside, the sheep huddled beneath the lean-to and the barn lantern swung in the wind. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" Rosalind asked. He looked at her for a long moment. "This is quiet," he said. "The kind I never knew I needed." She smiled, tracing the curve of Clara's cheek with her thumb. "She'll grow up knowing things we had to learn the hard way." "She'll know how to stay," Fletcher said. Rosalind met his gaze. "So will I." That night, he hung the cradle beside the bed and they both watched their daughter sleep, the fire throwing soft light across the floorboards. Years passed and the land stayed honest. Clara learned to walk chasing lambs through the pasture, her laughter rising like wind through the grass. Fletcher taught her how to read tracks, how to tell the sky before a storm. Rosalind showed her how to card wool and plant seeds deep enough to hold through spring. They grew together, not in leaps, but in the steady way snow melts into river, a building towards something lasting. And in the quiet of each evening, when the work was done and the fire burned low, Fletcher reached for Rosalind's hand and found it always there, strong, certain, home.